Okay, well, it's a little bit after 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and start. As we talked about before, we're going to break up into subcommittees one more time, and we're going to finalize any recommendations that the subcommittees may have. You've got a draft here that incorporates the notes that the note takers from the different subcommittees included, reflecting some of the discussions that have taken place in the subcommittees. For the most part, I would say those are clearly indicated. There are some comments in here that that Steve made just independently, and if you see some that don't say anybody made them, those are Steve's. Process of elimination.
I'm really sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Anyway, we just, as I indicated in one of my emails, we just really felt, given the time crunch that we're in, it would be really helpful to get what we could from the subcommittees into this version so that we had a decent working draft for the meeting today. And then my plan afterwards, after we come back into the full session, is I literally plan on just going through this page by page and you can comment on behalf of the subcommittees, but since you guys have had it for like 10 days, I also really want to hear, or we all really want to hear what your personal comments are in addition to the subcommittees. And I guess I would just say, I know the staff has gone over the draft as well. There are no staff comments in here, but as we work through it, if the staff could just mention if there are particular gaps that they see that we still need to work on a little bit more, that would be really helpful. So I think at this point we can go ahead and break up into the subcommittees unless anybody has any questions, concerns, things to share. Okay. When we come back, we'll approve the minutes.
That's pretty intense Supreme Court decisions in 2 days.
Yep. Okay.
6 to 3 or is it 5-4?
Start. I don't know. I just have a text.
I would say that.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, we'll start in a second. I think we're still waiting for a couple of members to come back from the subcommittees, so. Yeah, I heard about it before and thought it sounded really great, but this is the first year. I'm settled on that. Yeah. Committed to it. And all of a sudden it's a good comfort.
Are you going to Terry's fundraiser at Shillings next week?
And it's really
It's the 29th.
This is for Carrie and
So,
I think I'm gonna go ahead and open the meeting. Jim will be along, I'm sure. So I'll call the meeting to order, and the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the May 27th minutes. Does anybody have any comments or? No? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second? All right. All right, thank you. So we got that taken care of. So I've been trying to figure out the best way of tackling this, and given our time constraints, we talked a little bit about it in the subcommittee that I was sitting in. I think the best way to do this is we're just gonna go through it the old-fashioned way on paper and just page through it. And I want to give the subcommittee note takers the opportunity to say what came out of their subcommittees, what they want to add here, but we also distributed the plan early so that individuals would have an opportunity to look at it and add any comments or concerns that they had individually. So if that's okay, I would just ask you to take your paper copies, and if you have notes from yourself, just put them side by side, and we could just go for it. I mean, let's make this really a robust discussion. This is one of the last times we're gonna be able to dive as deep.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So for this current draft, we have note takers add things in.
Yeah, ahead of time.
Right now, as we're reporting out some of the things our groups just talked about, are we expecting that DES is gonna be basically taking those notes and adding it in, or are we still gonna be submitting?
We talked a little bit
Okay.
about that. That sort of was my thought. I mean, who's actually taking, well, I guess actually we're videoing this,
Yeah.
right? So, I was thinking, how are they gonna get everything written in? I sort of anticipated that, staff would work to, include a lot of our comments. But why don't we do what we're doing, and then, the other alternative is that if some of the subcommittee note takers wanna add stuff that came from the subcommittees, that would help the staff, and then maybe they can start to include individual comments or something. So why don't we, does that make sense? All right. I mean, I've got several comments, but I'm just gonna give everybody the opportunity. So on page 1, does anybody have anything to say?
So, something that came up in our recycling composting subcommittee was just two overarching thoughts about the document in general. One was, we were wondering if it might ultimately be easier to organize some part of this document by material type. Because, for example, if you want to find all the recommendations regarding food waste, you're going to have to dig through the different goals and the different strategies to find all the different places food waste is referenced in this document. Same with C&D. And so we talked a bit about it, and Paige did share that looking at the Vermont plan, they do have some sections organized by material type. So that was sort of one question, because I feel like that's what I would want to be able to go to in this document, is go to a few specific material types and to see all the strategies related to them. And right now it's really spread out, which made it a little hard at some places, I think, to put recommendations in the right spot. And then my other question was, again, getting back to, we talked about how do we make sure that this document ultimately doesn't become just a huge laundry list, and instead we're actually providing some type of prioritization about what are the most important things we want to focus on in terms of maybe short-term and long-term recommendations, because it's already getting quite long. And so just want to make sure we think about that in the final draft, is how are we going to actually provide some prioritization, because it's very detailed already.
But if you didn't want to organize it that way, the way you could also get after that is leaving the format is the same, but you could put an appendix and,
Yeah, that's what I was
organize it by
thinking.
waste stream and just say, composting C,
Yeah.
X, Y, Z pages
That should
or
work as well.
sections or whatever.
Yes.
And that way you'd have a way of finding them easier.
Yes, yes, something like.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because that'll make it a more functional tool for the people that are using it. I think on the prioritization, we're just gonna have to see where we are when we're done and how some of it is in some of our overarching goals, I think. But, All right, anybody else?
Page 1,
Okay.
comment came up, RSA 149M2, you've got some percentages there. It's recommended that we put a baseline in 2018, which was referenced to.
Well, the other thing is that, I'd like to see more of the statute put in here, because I went back to look at what municipal waste means for purposes of the diversion goal, and it actually includes businesses. I mean, it's broader than just the word municipal. So my thought was that we put more of the statute in there up front so people know what we're talking about. I mean, it's a really important statute that we're driving toward.
I think that was the theme that came out of the comments and discussions that we had, and also what municipal waste was. I mean, from our perspective, it includes all those things, but somebody brought up in the discussion that it could thought to be limited to what the municipality generates and not all the commercial entities.
Yeah, and that's why I actually went and looked, because I was like, how did we do a diversion goal that only focused on towns? Well, the answer is we didn't. So, anyway, if we just fill in the statute, and then I know the staff is working on the biennial report, we've got a lot of stuff going on, so hopefully we could fill in some facts there.
So, to Steve's point, the discussion was about, kind of splitting hairs between municipalities, commercial, and all the various generators. If you look at some of our neighboring states' waste plans, they don't identify the waste generators except by generation. It's, if you're generating X tons per week, here's the first crack, second, and starts ratcheting down. Because when we were talking, the first up to 2030 is the low-hanging fruit, or the low-cost fruit. As you get post 2030 to 2050, that's going to become more expensive. And if we're just looking at this kind of universal landscape of waste generators, we're not prioritizing, this focus. And by looking at some of the larger generators, that's going to be your, the easiest ones to address. And by looking at them first, and getting some market development and other things created, as we get to the back half of this goal, it could be that roadway is a bit paved at that point, whereas the way that this is being approached, the prioritization is by waste type and not necessarily by quantity, which can help drive some infrastructure.
Is that going to be a comment later in the document that your committee, I mean, let's find a home for that, because this actually is just a recitation of the statute, but I think that's a really good.
It's more of an overarching comment to the document, because there's no place for that necessarily to land. That we can have goals, but as far as prioritization, it can help drive that. Because to your point, the general public may not understand municipal solid waste and think that we're focused on municipalities. But to clearly define those priorities, I think, could be helpful.
I mean, maybe let's think about this as we go through. I mean, to put in somewhere, explore the option of differentiating by size of generator or something. I mean, maybe we can put that in here somewhere. And we have a rough outline here. We've got an introduction, background. We also have plan priorities. I mean, we can beef up more of that language up front too as we need to. Anybody else on this page? So Mike and Paige, I just wanted to say that if there's a gap that you identify that you want to share on any of these particular pages, just go ahead and say so. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Because I know that you've looked through some things, and I know this isn't the definitive left, but so my only thing, just as a global thing, I felt like we talked a lot about municipalities. We didn't talk much in here about solid waste districts, and I didn't see the term RPCs anywhere, the regional planning commissions, and Paige especially has a lot of experience with those, so I know that they have a role to play. They can help research grants, so I think somewhere in here, we at least have to, I mean, in fact, maybe we need a defined term or to be sort of more all-inclusive, I don't know. Anyway, that's my idea on that one. All right, page 2, did anybody?
I have one which might seem minor, but under A, under the very top there, we get very specific on what diversion is, but we don't get specific on the other parts of that sentence. So I would suggest removing the words through methods such as reuse, recycling, composting, only because I think we're talking in really general terms. And
The problem is that's a recitation of the statute as it exists.
is it?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how it was written. So,
Because later on, we're going to talk about
Right.
specific
right.
and provide other options, and it just could be construed that we're limiting to that.
Yeah.
Although it says such as, but that's not
Yeah.
how it always gets written or interpreted.
Right. I mean, that's just the way the statute was written, and we're just gonna go big on it.
All right, that's fine.
All right. Okay. Plan priorities.
Second edit, starting with KE, your edit.
I know who she is.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's a comment for the group, but for myself personally, I have a little bit of concern on some of the text that's in here. I prefer to have this end after identified goals. So it would read, plan recognize the requirement of a reliable funding source to support private and public efforts to achieve identified goals, period. Versus getting into some of the other points that we talked about here. About what a poor job the state's done previously. I'm not sure we want to put that in the plan. It's more editorial in nature, and I personally don't think it belongs in there. That's my take.
I mean, I think the point that I was trying to get to in that comment is that we have a lot of ground to make up, and you know, that's where I was going to with that, and I thought it kind of identified the fact that we've had I mean, maybe we don't like the word planning, but you know, there have been funding shortfalls, and we haven't done the planning that we need to, and that we're behind overall where our northeast states are. And I mean, I think that point has been a driver that has gotten a lot of people interested in solid waste. So that's why I put it in there. I mean, I don't know. And I mean, I should say our comments are what's going to DES. What remains in here when we're done after our input is, you know, it's kind of up to them. But the other issue is that when we're talking about a gap, there's really nothing that we've talked about so far in here about, you know, landfills, the public benefit analysis, concerns that people have in our state about out-of-state waste and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, that's going to come in here in some way. So I was just trying to set the stage a little bit. So I don't know what other people think.
To that point, let's talk about that. I still would argue that it should be ended here, but I think the point of out-of-state waste, that could be stated in here, that, you know, we've got records that show how much out-of-state waste has come in, and if it's public information, we include it in the plan, it basically acknowledges that that's an issue, so that could be part of the plan. You know, over the last 5 years, 50% of what's come into the state of New Hampshire has come from out-of-state sources, and this is consuming capacity. And this plan makes an effort to rectify some of those issues that the state struggled with. Something to that point versus, I mean, I know you're just sitting here typing away what's coming
Right.
out. I totally get it. But I think from a plan that gets publicized, we just need to think about maybe the tone of it a little bit. That's my only personal opinion.
I was gonna say, my expectation is that the DES staff will do some finessing.
Yeah, I hope they do. I mean, they should, really. I mean, we're throwing stuff around and putting stuff in sections that probably
Right.
belong in a different spot.
We're
but-
just giving them input.
Yeah.
I mean, so let's just, I mean, whether that sticks or it doesn't, I think that somehow we need to say something in here that we're behind the 8 ball in some way, because we haven't been planning and there's been insufficient funding, and that, you know, out-of-state waste remains a concern for the people of our state. I mean, it clearly is. And we will have the biennial report. I think we'll hear a little bit more about that later, but I mean, I personally feel that that biennial report is really a key piece of what we're strategizing here, so, you know, that will tell the tale that you're talking about. So whether you put it in plan priorities or whatever, you know, those are just really important issues that are in our state right now, and which are things we have to be thinking about when we're developing the plan.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think that it's imperative that we put in at least something that speaks to the data here. Because I mean, if we're framing a problem, well, what is the problem? What's the scope of the problem? I mean, if 50% of the waste is coming in from out of state, and we're concerned about, you know, you make the allusion to we become vulnerable to becoming a regional disposal site. Well, I mean, we're already a regional disposal site, you know, at 50%.
I
So,
was trying to be
you know,
diplomatic.
yeah, well.
But the problem
Just trying to
is,
avoid this conversation we're
it's,
having.
it's,
Let's be honest.
the problem, I mean, I feel what I wrote there is true. Whether we want to put it in the priorities or not is something else, or if we want to just, I just think those two concepts are things that have to be.
But it's in fact actual data.
Right.
And you can just say, in the
That's
past
what you
5
listed.
years, we've had
That's
this
what it
is what the mix looks like, and then, you know, let people come to their own conclusions, I guess, from it. But I mean, at least it gives you a reference point. I think it's important, because otherwise it doesn't feel like, oh well, it's a problem, but you know, well, how big of a problem is it?
Well, we're gonna have, that's why I was saying we're gonna have the biennial report.
Yeah.
So that'll come out soon, and that'll help tell the tale. So, anyway, I want to get these discussion points out there, so they're there, and we'll just, so that's fine. Thank you. Anybody else have anything on page 2?
We sort of, I think we've talked about it, and I'm trying to read my notes and see how that relates. Maybe what we were trying to suggest is right up in the goals, we might speak more about environmental justice, sustainability, climate change, really make that more of a front and center part of the goals as well. It's not absent, it's definitely in here about mid-page, and it's here in the goals, end of page, but I think our committee was saying maybe we need to have that like front and center, just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about like infrastructure and climate change and whether some of these goals could be combined, and I don't know. We sort of struggled with that. I mean, I think part of where we landed on that discussion too was we should say somewhere that these goals aren't listed necessarily in order of priority. It's just a listing, so you shouldn't, I think that's kind of where we ended up. And I mean, I think we also recognize that, I mean, I think we should talk about these goals, if they should be amplified with the language, just not take them for granted here. But if we combine them, there's also a lot of action items and stuff that we have to figure out how all that sorts out. So I guess I would ask on the goals, recognizing that this isn't a list of priority, is there something, and you see that I added one. Is there something you want to change, you want to talk about?
So for goal 1, I understand the wording seems a little I can't think of the word, but we're talking about how much we're generating, right? So reducing the volume of the waste stream isn't, it's too like industry standard language that, you know, public might not understand, but we're talking about reducing the volume of a generated waste stream, right? So do we want to put generated in that goal? Like New Hampshire is going to generate less waste versus reduce. I think it's more action reasonable and understandable, what we're talking about, like generate less waste, not what's the volume of a waste stream. You just compact it more and you have a smaller volume.
So you're saying to be more specific, what we're trying
Yeah.
to do, we're trying to waste reduction, waste diversion.
Right. So we're talking about generating less waste, not making the volume less.
Because you could incinerate it and reduce the volume.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there you
Yeah, I
go.
was gonna say, when you start talking to technical people, that first sentence is waste energy,
Right.
let's just do that. Yeah, and I'm not saying we should do that, but that is sort of what you
But
get
that's not
if
the
you're.
intent of
Yeah,
that.
but the
that
intent is
goal.
to generate less waste.
Exactly,
Right.
I'm
And that's
with
what I'm
both
getting
of you,
at.
we're saying the
Yep.
same thing,
I think that's what
absolutely.
the goal should be.
Generate less.
Yeah, and I don't think it changes what you have in the goal, I just think it's the wording makes it
So how do you
clear.
guys how do you suggest rewriting that?
Well,
Generate.
Reduce solid waste generation.
however you wanna do it, you guys are writing it, I'm just making a comment.
Is that the,
No, it's
is that the
good.
same as number 3 then? Maximize the diversion?
Well, we talked about that in our group, that's
Yeah.
different. So after you reduce how much waste you're generating, right?
Okay.
Which is gonna
Whatever's
be
left, you're gonna
MSW,
take
is
back.
gonna be recyclables, it's gonna be organic. Then it's diverting that, right? So that's kinda like the next level down. They had to clarify me on that one.
So this is in line with the solid waste hierarchy also.
Yeah.
To
Right.
reduce
Yeah. So-
the amount of waste generated first, and after you've reduced what you can, then you divert what's left
Right.
into other streams.
So what did you say, Mike? Reduce solid waste generation?
Yeah.
This is a stupid, have we a definition of solid, we do in the statutes have a
Yes.
definition of solid waste?
It needs to be updated.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Take a
I
look
think,
at it.
I
It goes
think,
back
I
to
mean, if I
1990.
had a goal in here, it's review legislation, but
So
how?
are you suggesting, maybe you mentioned this before, like a glossary of terms or definition sections in this, whether it's in the front or the back, just so,
That's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, but I think that's right, but I think we use the term solid waste in here so much that maybe we should have some sort of, it's in the statute, I mean, we can put it in the statute. I mean, we can put in that definition, sort of like our use of the term municipal solid waste. We just have to be sure of our terms.
yeah.
Okay, anybody else on page, oh, so you see that I added, number 8 as a goal.
I'd like to change the first word there to explore.
Why?
Because we're gonna meet up at the State House
Yeah,
on
yeah.
this very topic.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying this is the final statement. Anybody have anything else? I mean, do you wanna go with explore? I mean, I don't know.
Well, can the plan require it? I mean, it sounds like it's a legislative.
It is.
Well, it says, well, like here, it says, it's definitive, develop local markets, ensure, reduce.
Yeah,
So
but
I
that
didn't
doesn't
think.
require a legislative.
No, well, some of them might, so I just think that in some ways, we've gotta be a little bit more definitive of things, that's why I put the word established there. We do need to have an ongoing funding source.
Can I ask a question about just our format for this? So I'm just noting that we're still on page 2 and we have an hour left of our meeting. And it's a 14-page document. And I'm just wondering, to what level of detail should we be focusing our review right now? Like, are we trying to change individual words if it's still just an outline for staff to work on? Because I'm just, like, how much of the next hour can we spend on this and are we gonna get through it?
I don't disagree with you, I think
Just wondering.
how we define our goals is really an important
Agreed.
discussion, so, anyways,
I
alright.
would agree with that, because we did a lot of talking in our little breakout, and we really didn't get very far with the document, and it was a smaller group. So, I think that's a good point.
Okay. leave our discussion hanging out there.
Yeah, okay.
All right, I mean, ultimately, it's probably all the same. I just think that it's really important that we establish an ongoing funding source. Otherwise, I don't see how any of the goals that we're setting forth are achievable. So
to just piggyback on that philosophy, I think that the idea that was discussed in our group about a funding source was that one source may not be sufficient. So that by exploring funding sources
all right, I'll
as a
vote for
mechanism, you know, without, an example that was given was municipal pay-as-you-throw programs that are unfortunately established poorly, can have the reverse effect on what you're hoping to accomplish by establishing a pay-as-you-throw cost mechanism that covers too many costs. And as a result, your goal is to reduce disposal, but you're attaching all of your costs to that bag that you're hoping to reduce. So to just explore other opportunities, other states have used multiple funding sources
Okay,
to accomplish
so
this.
why don't we change it, explore reliable ongoing funding sources to support.
Absolutely.
I'm good with that, and to that point, a couple other things on what you just stated. I mean, if you look at these goals, by 2030, we need to develop 350,000 tons a year of processing capacity to get to these goals. 630,000 tons of recycling capacity in some form by 2050. $1 a ton, $10 a ton isn't going to do that. I mean, I think that program, that's going to come back up, I know, next session, that could support the DES. But if you need this kind of massive infrastructure development, that's not going to do it. And maybe New Hampshire Municipal Finance Authority, low interest loans that can be available to develop this infrastructure, that's a funding source that's out there. I mean, people know about it, but not everybody knows about it. And to Mark's point, I think there's multiple sources that we need to look
Okay.
at as a state to get to where we need to get to.
All right, great. I think that's great. Okay, excellent. All right, we'll just move it along here. Okay, anybody have anything on page 3? So what I was just, I have a note here. I don't know how to get this in, and I'm just going to say this to the staff. I sort of looked at the statutes, what towns are required to have. They're required to have solid waste management plans. I mean, you could require towns to have solid waste committees. They need some way to centralize their focus on solid waste, and so that was it just sort of all, well, I guess I keyed off of your comment, Steve, where make resources available to community solid waste committees. I think a lot of towns don't even have them, so, you know, I don't know.
Was that where the solid waste districts would come in then?
No, this is like towns, who's responsible within a town to really focus on solid waste. I mean, we have public works departments, but if you want, anyway.
So, look at your local community, right? We live in New Hampshire, small town. You know, we have a solid waste committee that explores, you know, when we do the household hazardous waste collection day, who we're going to contract to do that. We've got municipal collection, let's go up to bid. We're going to go to these 3 companies. What's the scope of services that we're going to provide? We're going to have, you know, pay as you throw, or we're going to put containers out. I mean, there's folks, volunteers, but generally most municipalities have those groups, and my thought would be to feed resources to them so they know what options are available to them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is a goal that I put in, sort of an overarching thing, is try to keep equipping municipalities and businesses with educational tools that they can put on their websites and stuff like that. And a lot of that could be generated at the state level. So you'll see references to that.
So a model of that, I mean, is Department of Labor joint loss committee requirements within a municipality of particular sizes.
Right.
So it's not the same thing, but it's a state requirement for a particular committee to be established by rule.
At That's
So
the idea.
to create something similar.
Yeah.
So it already exists in another.
Yeah, so we can just sort of beef up the responsibilities and.
So, not to get off track, but should we somehow, Mike, if you're taking notes, look to that as a model in the plan and maybe just a footnote in this?
I would just ask the staff to make that note.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I
But
mean,
something
and-
that's already established is
Yeah.
a guideline.
And the thing is, in the Vermont SWPs that I read through, they have this requirement that municipalities have resource materials on their websites to help people understand how to recycle or whatever, and that sort of feeds into what you said. Okay, anybody else? Page 3. Page 4. My only thing was on action item number, the third action item on the page, we talked about procurement policies with respect to the state, and I was wondering if we couldn't figure out something also as far as procurement resources available to municipalities that are trying to do better. So it's not just state focused, it's municipality focused, maybe even business, I don't know. Okay, anybody else?
So to that point, DES has pollution prevention and small business ombudsman, so there are programs within DES that could be promoted more, and then they do on occasion participate in schools, so I think that, expansion of existing programs, for some of this, we don't have to recreate a wheel, it's maybe just make the wheel a little bigger.
Okay, great.
Aaron, last insert, action 1, develop and approve waste diversion tracking. Wasn't sure what you meant by that. Last sentence on the page before. What are you thinking there?
Just data collection stuff, how you track, it goes to the waste generation, what.
The reporting, would that be on like municipalities, facilities, businesses, or everybody? What are you thinking?
I was thinking that if we're going to try to achieve our waste diversion goals, we need good ways of tracking what's being generated. So my idea there was just to come up with tools that could be easily used by everybody for tracking.
Would that be just revising the annual reporting that's done so they get better data? Because facilities have to issue an annual report. I don't know if that probably has all the data you need. I don't remember what's all in the reports. I don't generate them, but there's a lot of data in that. It's just how the state processes that data.
Well, I just thought since data is really important, making sure that we have the best tracking tools that we can have is
But I think to
important.
Steve's point, there's already people generating data. So do we have more people generate it? So like to go way off the deep end.
Have the people who are producing the data have the best tools that they can have to produce the data they're producing. I don't know. I just know that we've talked about when we had the new diversion goals, there were certain different ways of characterizing and looking at things. And I thought this was a pretty bland statement. We just want to make sure that the software people have the best that they can have. That's all.
Does it?
We don't
maybe
have to
going
have
off track a little bit.
diversion. We could have some
Yeah.
other word. How about waste tracking tools?
Yeah. Review
Or-
systems and programs in place now for waste tracking and diversion, and make recommendations for improvement if necessary, or something. Because we've got loads of data, and to Eric's point, is it enough? Do they need something more? I don't really know.
Well, and you have the data, but not everybody necessarily does. I just.
Yeah.
I'm not looking to put more responsibility on the landfill operators, but for my town, if something somebody gave them a software package that helped them do better at tracking what they're doing, they probably would be happy to have that.
Yeah.
I just think that if we're gonna work toward achieving goals, we have to have the best tracking that we can have. That was all I was trying to get at.
Yeah, we had talked about doing a waste characterization study as sort of the first step for the state. It seems as though other states have, that's kind of been the first mark that they make, you know, like they just kind of come in right out the gate with that.
Right.
You know, start there and then kind of proceed.
Almost more importantly, though, it needs to be standardized. I mean, everybody has to be understanding what the definitions all mean and then reporting data consistently. Otherwise, you're
I think that's a really good point. I think standardization is good too. So, I don't know. This was to help the department in figuring out what we're doing in the state. That was it.
Should we include the others?
Not by definition.
Okay, did you have a comment? I had a comment getting back to the one you had brought up, the third action from the top, collaborating with
Yeah.
procurement. So our group talked today about how we can help encourage reuse from large generators of waste, like things like supply, excess supply. And someone had mentioned that we have a group called IRN, the Reuse Network here in New Hampshire, and they work with generators of surplus, and so it's not just state agencies and the public. They work with schools, they work with corporations, and so we thought a recommendation about researching and sharing examples of these types of reuse organizations would be useful. So I would think that could fall under that third action from the top.
Okay. You wrote something.
It's in my notes. It
Okay,
also
all right.
showed the, yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay, page 3.
That was 4.
Oh, 4. 5. Sorry.
So now we're cruising.
Yeah, I know. We're going backwards. Page 5. Yeah. Anybody? So my only comment here is that when I was adding comments, there's been so much talk about PFAS, concern about PFAS. I just wanted to, and we had talked about it in the Waste Reduction Committee before. Steve, is just, you know, if you're going to reduce toxicity in the waste stream, we should be talking more about PFAS. Because otherwise this was a lot of household hazardous waste. And then, you know, we just had this federal action designating several chemicals as really bad news. So I just wanted to make sure that we have some PFAS references in here.
Can I just cut in real quick that Lynn has some comments, so I'm gonna unmute
Okay.
her. Oh, Lynn, I think you're unmuted.
You hear me?
Barely.
Okay. Then I'll
Oh,
type.
there it goes.
That'll
No,
be
no,
fine.
we can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, so this goes back. So I was just gonna say, when you were talking about the data collection piece of it and a tool that, and I'm sure Reagan could amplify on this, there is something that is free to states and communities, been around for quite a while, the ReTrack, and it's what many of the states in the region use for collecting municipal data, and it does include resources and tools. So it might be something to at least be looking at as a possible support system.
Perfect. And that can be part of our outreach efforts too, to make sure that everybody has the best stuff that they can.
So, to that point, if there's tools already out there, instead of developing and putting more on them, should we say, you know, explore systems or programs to improve? Because there may be already something that we can pull from the shelf. Instead of developing something, you know, if something's already there,
Oh
let's
yeah,
try to
okay,
use
so
it.
it's the word develop. All
Yeah.
right.
I'm okay with your PFAS comment. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think if we're really concerned about it, concentrations in food packaging and wrappers are really high, but from a volume standpoint, it's not very much. Our concern is stuff like carpeting, furniture. If you look clothing, I mean, those are the textiles, those are the, you know, waste materials that are heavily laden with this material, and there's such volumes. That's what's problematic. So I would, my comment here was to insert textiles, carpets, and furniture or something in addition to what you have.
I agree. I was trying to be
Yeah.
more limited, but I mean, wanna just add another action too?
No, I just insert it. Reduce ban chemical concerns, PFAS, consumer products to be identified, such as
Yeah, okay, then
textiles, carpet.
textiles.
Right, just insert it there instead of adding something else.
As we were talking about this issue in our group, it kind of came up in how it impacts the potential of diversion. That the existing problem with PFAS can create problems with diversion based on market availability. That if a product is deemed contaminated with PFAS, nobody wants it. So it becomes a challenge. So just, you know, for DES's perspective, just considering some of those opportunities. An example in my mind is food scrap composting. That because of food packaging, there can be PFAS in it, and you may inadvertently contaminate what is otherwise a beneficial reuse. So there just needs to be some consideration about how we're moving toxins through our environment.
Yeah, actually, on the next page, on page 6, I just had handwritten here, reducing PFAS and PFOAs under action item 2. In the waste stream, reduces all these other burdens. You know, if we get it, trying to remove it up front, I mean, there's wastewater concerns, there's all kinds of public health protection generally. So, you know, the whole idea of reducing toxicity in the waste stream just goes right down the line. Okay,
But it's more on the producers.
Correct.
Yeah, and I
than
think
the
we put
consumer
something
or the
in here. Yep.
converters in.
But that's what I'm
So
saying, you know,
this
if we're,
is if you're looking for a specific recommendation, New Hampshire might consider adopting the revisions to the model toxics and packaging law. It does have a toxics and packaging law, but they did revise the model late last year to include PFAS and other problem chemicals.
Did you guys have a reference to that in your toxic? No, you had toxics of concern or something. Maybe not. I think we should add that, Lynn. I think that's a good, so we can say explore.
Yeah, it is. It's under bottom of page 6, second item from the bottom.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, that's what I thought. So, all right, anybody else have anything on this? So on that, under legislation, I had, you guys, I think, referred back to our HB 617 recommendation where I basically called out batteries and electronic devices. After the word bans, I would just put comma and it'd say including or including, because I don't want it just limited to batteries and electronic devices.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what page again?
That's page 6 under action
Towards the
2
bottom.
under legislation.
Sorry,
Just the second line under the first action 2.
Could we go up to the top of the page? Sorry.
Okay.
You got 2 actions that you included. One was funding to remove toxins in a particular concern in waste stream. I think that's beyond what we can do here, because you know, materials that have these toxins are coming into the state at the consumer level, being manufactured overseas. I think that's outside of the scope of what DES and New Hampshire can do. I think the second insert you have is okay. It still talks to that, but to come up with funding to divert toxins from the waste stream, I'm thinking PFAS, how are we going to do that? We don't want it in the waste stream, but it's coming in, and I don't know how we can come up with funding to remove the toxins. I wasn't sure what that was. I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Where the second bullet, or the second action item, action 2, talks about reducing toxins of concern. I think the first one is maybe outside the scope of the plan.
Well, on a related note, regarding the identify funding, to remove toxins, and at the bottom of the page, establish reliable ongoing funding to support state diversion efforts. I guess I'm wondering, wouldn't we need to put that under all of these, and should that instead just kind of be an overarching part of the plan, as we discussed, as like a goal, that there needs to be some funding to affect all the proposals in here, but otherwise I would expect that we might be putting funding under every single recommendation, and it gets a bit repetitive, or are they
Yeah.
really distinct?
Yeah.
I mean, it gets, that was, so let's just, delete the one about the funding for removing toxins, because we've got the funding stuff. I mean, this, I suggested having an overarching goal because it kept popping up everywhere, whether we include it as action items, if we have it as a goal, I mean, I don't know.
Can I just make a general comment? Under goal 2, we have action 2, action 2, action. Can they be like action 2.1, 2.2?
Yeah,
I
so
would
the,
love
so the
that.
reason why was because we knew that there was gonna be so many like changes in 2A, 2B in the order of it.
Okay.
So just
Yeah.
for that is the intent, is to
Okay,
have like
that's
2A,
fine.
2B,
Yeah.
but for
That's a
this,
good point.
we were like, there's gonna be so many edits, it's
Mhm.
gonna be hard to keep up with that, you know, as we go, so.
I mean, I think the staff will just have to think about this thing where we have, I mean, like, I put education stuff in, you did too, in all of them. But, and it does get repetitive, but it also is an action item to help you achieve your goals, so. Anyways, okay, anybody else on 6?
When we talk about under regulatory updates, talking about a requirement for disposal sites to hold annual HHW collection days. If that means that every single town with a transfer station has to hold their own HHW day, I would suggest that we wanna make sure that communities can partner together. I mean, was that the intent of that?
No, I put
No.
the word disposal sites.
So transfer station's not a disposal site, it's
Oh, just so you're saying just the incinerators and,
Right,
the actual
Oh, that's
end
it.
of life
Landfills.
location.
okay.
Yeah.
So we might need to clarify that.
Well, it says disposal
Yeah.
sites, transfer
But-
station.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah, okay.
And Mike pointed out something, that the addition above, something that I added, we already do that. It's a requirement that's already in the regulations. We do it as a company. It's pretty specific and robust, but it seems like other people are doing it. It's already there, so it doesn't need to be in the plan, I guess, because it's already a requirement. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, so you're speaking about on page 6, kind of towards the bottom, that first paragraph that's edited there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
For the
basically.
regulatory updates, waste reduction committee action 2 is an insert that we made based on conversations. We're already doing it as a state, I guess, maybe different levels, but I don't know if it needs to be added in here. Right, we don't need to restate the regulations at this point. I think it's important that it's done, right? That, Greg, stuff coming into your location.
Yep.
You wanna know what's coming in, you're reviewing it, you may be asking for analysis, is it acceptable, is it not acceptable? If it's not acceptable, you can't take it.
That's right.
Right, and we do that, and Mark, I'm sure you do that
We
as
all do.
well. Right, so if that's already happening, maybe it doesn't need to be here, so I guess what I'm saying is strike
It could also it could stay there, and it could be more of an acknowledgement that requirement exists, and maybe we need to evaluate best management practices or like collaborate with facilities to figure out,
Which
what's
is
working.
happening right now, it'd be good to notice that, because it is an effort to reduce toxicity.
Or you could say continue to require or something.
So the other thing, previous discussion that we had, under this thing, topic here, there might be better options available for non-hazardous items, some soil might benefit from going to ESMI, for a beneficial
Yeah.
use as opposed to use as a landfill cover. So maybe making it a bit more robust. Yes, that's a requirement, but there might be a better use of some soils, just as a.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I think that's a really good point. I think as a state, if there's capacity available, like ESMI, right? We should try to maximize those facilities to the extent there's capacity there before it goes to a landfill. Right. If you've got something that is available for recycling, it's like the same recycling, right? You've got recycling capacity, that's where material should go before it ends up going ultimately to disposal. So that's a good point. I've thought of that, but that's really not weaved in here a little bit. Maybe that's a goal somewhere, like we can pull into this, that if there's capacity available for recycling alternatives, you know, compared to landfilling, that should be the first choice. I mean, that's really what it is.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
So,
Okay.
and go one step further, right? If I'm a developer and I'm gonna propose a project like that, I've got some basis to say, okay, I know I'm gonna get product versus saying someone across the street or down the road is gonna undercut me on price. The preference is to go with this facility first versus going to a landfill. I got some assurance that to the extent I can. So that's a
Hopefully
concept.
yeah.
Somehow we can maybe weave in there.
Weave in there. Okay.
Probably not you.
All right, half hour, although I'm gonna say if you guys can stay an extra 15 minutes, I think we're doing really good work here. All right, page 7.
So, the first sentence in goal 3 is kind of back to what I was talking about before. We can eliminate the words after diverted, from disposal by recycling or, well, I guess it should be diverted from disposal, take out by recycling or composting, and then leave this whenever possible, because I think you're already focusing into two methods versus there might be all these other things that might come out of the other actions or other alternative technologies. We're getting too specific.
I mean, did we have some language there, Jim? We were also gonna talk about infrastructure, or
Yeah, so
adding a
we were-
sentence about infrastructure in the preliminaries there.
Yeah, today's discussion in our group, we weren't sure whether we should be in goal 3 or goal 6, but we had a lot of discussion on adding some language or having the DES think about some issues in very much infrastructure. That's right. That's right.
But I think the other thing was we were just maybe gonna put a sentence in here that to maximize the diversion, there will necessarily have to be development of better infrastructure or something, just as a preliminary.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
it.
So, I don't know if the staff could grab that. Okay, anybody else have something here?
I don't want to back up, but I will. Sorry. Bottom of 6. You read it, Karen? You could establish. Can we say explore? Be consistent with other
Sure.
language.
Okay, sources.
Yeah, sources. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on this page?
On page 7, I just had one observation, and it's just language. On the very last piece of the page, and it's under the solid waste operator training piece, but it's action 3, the last comment. It says require all entities to provide source reduction, reuse, recycling information on their websites using tools developed by NHDES. Now I'm just curious if you're just simply referring to the solid waste operations sites, or if you're talking all entities, including businesses and places that include websites, to include that on their website, because it could be cumbersome to a business to have to do that in such a specific way. I think offering education is important. I don't disagree with the point that's trying to be made. I think the language is restrictive though. And how that could be achieved.
I mean, we can change this. I mean, this actually is just this whole thing about SWWPs, and in Vermont, if you're a solid waste management entity, which includes municipalities and businesses, they want you to put resource information online so people can go there. If we want to just make this, so that's where that came from. You don't have to use the word entities, you can have something else, but I think the idea, at least in Vermont, was that you want to have online tools for people to go to figure out how to do what we need to do to divert waste, and that's all that was. I mean,
I think it could be as simple as a link to the state website.
Yeah, I mean, that, I agree.
So if I'm a business and I wanna use a vendor for waste, and as that vendor has, training materials for my employees as such, and I wanna use that process, it doesn't have to be using tools developed by the state. I would wanna look at wording more like using,
Available tools
or tools in compliance with, it can be, a lot of different language.
Just eliminate using tools developed by NHD.
Yeah, all right, let's just take that out
Somebody
and
else
broaden
might-
it out.
might develop those
Sure.
tools, right?
Sure.
And all entities, not to nitpick, but if I'm Joe's Pizza down the street,
Or
do
do
I
you
have
wanna
to have
put,
website? Municipalities?
well, I don't know, I could see somebody like, DH having something like this and not the local pizza parlor.
Right, but how do we cut
Yeah, I
that
don't
off?
know.
All entities is everybody.
Yeah,
No, I
right.
know, so we'll change the word all. How about explore, what? Requiring, I don't know.
Well, if it's coming from the idea of a solid waste implementation plan, that would be expected to apply more clearly to, operators of transfer stations and disposal sites, many of whom already do have this information, but not all of them. So we
You
just
say
wanted
require large quantity generators to provide?
And this is where the concept of waste generation in our mind came to effect was, how do you split some of these groups up? It gets very difficult, and to reference the way Vermont worked towards their waste reduction goals, they split it out by waste generation amounts. It was, if you generate this plus or this plus, it starts ratcheting down.
To require it for entities to be identified or something like that. Or reasonable, I mean, I don't know.
That's where you get back to the definitions, because people are
Right.
gonna,
Right.
I'm gonna interpret it, I'm reasonably out of that requirement. Somebody's gonna say, well, no, I reasonably think you're in that requirement.
I mean, I would just say to the staff, the idea is to try to get information out there to people that's easily, available. It could be by waste generator size, or we could just make this bland that by entities to, including municipalities or whatever, and other entities to be identified. I just didn't feel like the burden should be totally on municipalities to provide this information. I mean, it could be Walmart.
Well, when we were talking about it too, the reality is municipalities are not generating the bulk of waste.
I
So
know.
if we have a waste reduction goal of 25%, we're not gonna get there if all of our eggs are in the municipal basket.
Right, which is,
So-
I was trying to broaden it out a little bit. I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable for Walmart or a hospital to have some sort of resource for information on it. Okay, 8. So the only thing that I had on this, it was, about halfway down, review the requirements of RSA 149M 23 to 25. I mean, we talked about this a little bit in alternative technologies. I think we should look a little, I mean, you say review, but there are already quite a few requirements in the statutes, but they're not very specific. They could be beefed up. They could also be a place where through regulation you could elaborate a little bit more on what the requirements are. And another topic that we talked about is trying to authorize DES to do a few more things through its regulatory authority than always requiring legislation. So this seemed like a place where maybe we could look at that and expand the regulatory authority a little bit more.
Kind of catching back to what we said before, in the middle of the page, Karen, you added develop better tools for tracking. We kind of talked about that, that there might already be tools.
So we can just fix that the way we
Yeah,
did
just
before.
make it consistent.
Right, well, and you see I also put it under data collection and research. I mean, you guys will know what you have, what you don't have, what you need. I mean, the bottom line is we gotta know what we're generating, and otherwise how do you calculate it? Okay. So, Steve, with, under legislation, did the staff have, you did something here, I can't really.
Page 1?
That's on page 8.
Yeah.
Under legislation, action 3, this was your, it says, because we had exposed waste disposal bans for food, mattresses, clean wood, textiles, and I feel like you crossed out glass and textiles. I mean, I don't know where that came from.
Hang on.
So I think part of that was just,
I don't
so right under the
Talking right here.
heading legislation on page 8, the first one.
Yeah.
So I think part of that goes back to a couple of things. One, textiles, you know, it's the PFAS issue. Glass is the availability of, I'll just say, good markets and how we define recycling and things of that nature. So just to be cautious about what we're banning to ensure that we're just not kicking the can, as it were, and disposing of it, say, in Georgia, as a result. So just to be considerate of those realities.
Yeah, and I guess I would say whether an item is called out here or not, it doesn't mean it can't be explored. This is just sort of an example, but that's what.
I think what I was thinking about at the time was maybe just market availability and those items that are realistic. I mean, textile disposal sounds really good, but it's pretty tough when you're picking up trash at the end of someone's driveway and they throw away an old shirt and pants and kids' stuff instead of going to Goodwill. We pick it up, goes to the site, gets dumped, we run over it. We don't want to stop the operation, stop picking out someone's, you know, sweatpants and a hoodie because, right, old socks, right? And the other thing I think is where this is really effective is we can do it at the front end. Once it comes to us, it's a problem. Once it comes in, you know, you get a pit at Pennacook and you're picking stuff, you're not going to be able to put it to good use.
You know, I can't remember anymore what's in the plan priorities, but I think we should hammer away at this solid waste hierarchy idea. We really want to stop things going in at the front because it's so much more expensive and wasteful at the other end. So, I mean, we can take out textiles, we can take out glass. I mean, I don't think this is a definitive list. There may be other things that we want to add at some point. So.
I think the important thing for us is that it's done at the front end.
Right.
It's done at the front end, something we brought up in the conversation. Is the market available and are those markets being supported? If you pull it out, and we've got no place to go with it. We're talking about trucking problems right now.
Yeah.
Recycling, you can't get rid of all stuff. It's really sad right now. So I'm just going out this is making stuff. So.
I see some comments in about availability and the recycling compost. I'm guessing these are Reagan's comments.
Yeah, R&C.
You know, I think that's where Steve is going with this is, and we talked quite a bit about this, and I know that's, it's goal 5 about market development, is one of my concerns, and I'll just say it right now, I guess it's a good time as any. As we develop markets, I want to be very mindful of what are those markets, and then it's more than just collection. So I think we collect the recyclables fairly well. It's where they go after we've collected them that's the problem. So when we're talking about investing in infrastructure, the infrastructure development is not in balers and trucks. It's in the markets that we're sending them to. And that's some of the problem we're experiencing now, and I know the NRA experiences this every day, is where are we sending it? So when we talk about those investments, it's important that we talk about what are those actual infrastructure investments. we're bailing things nicely, but where are we shipping them? That is the big unknown, and we're not spending, that's like some of the weakest language in this plan, in this document is about market development. And
Well,
it needs
and
to be much
Duncan
more
was
robust.
getting, I mean, that was a lot of what we talked about on the other side. We felt, Duncan, you said the same thing. He saw a real weakness
Yeah.
in the discussion of that. So some of the stuff that.
Yeah, maybe we find, because the word infrastructure throws us for a loop, right? Especially, I'm guessing it wound up tied in here to climate change because we were thinking of trucks or whatever. But I think your point, Duncan's point, infrastructure comes up with aggressive solid waste management districts, with developing markets. So maybe we need a different word. Because I don't know, at least to me as a
It's still
civil engineer,
infrastructure.
infrastructure is
Sure.
hardware,
Yeah.
but, you know, we wound up talking about infrastructure in the solid management district part and in the, maybe developing this recycling campus part, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So infrastructure gets really
Well,
lost.
I think overall, the point is, I think a lot of us agree we gotta beef up the infrastructure aspect, not bailers, but.
Well,
Yeah.
but we need to be clear about what that, you know, to
What
Jim's
that-
point, what that infrastructure is, because we
It's
can.
that definition issue again.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, it goes to a fundamental problem. I mean, you know, at the materials recovery facility in Keene, we have 9 sortations. It would be very difficult to add another sortation to the line because there's a physical aspect to this. And Keene, even though it, you know, from a scale standpoint is, you know, a lot larger than the town that I live in, Walpole, I still, even if I wanted to create a product for marketing, I don't have the ability to access that market because I just don't produce it in any kind of volume. I mean, that's why a centralized facility has some advantages, because then you're going to be able to remove from the processing those items that currently don't have markets and have sufficient volumes of these materials to then be able to access the markets in a much more realistic way, because you actually have something to market.
And just getting back to, you know, what specific items we list for possible disposal bans, the recycling and composting committee, subcommittee talked about that today. And what we ultimately came up with was a recommendation to pass legislation to form a study committee to dig into this further, instead of us attempting to name the specific items in this plan right now without further study.
Again, you know, to Steve's point too, as a disposal ban and as a disposal facility, there are disposal bans, and we're obligated to remove items from disposal that might not be market condition material at that point. So it makes it challenging when there's, and so it's not that we're against a disposal ban per se, but the enforcement is on the disposal site to remove that item. And it, you know, you pull a TV out of the waste stream, it is not a material that's destined for recycling at the point that we've received it, and yet we're obligated to remove it.
Could I just say, I actually think this solid waste working group could do a better job of researching the solid waste bans than a legislative study committee. So I mean, I'd just like to say that I think after our plan is out there in the first round, that we can zero in some more on these sorts of recommendations and take it from there.
Yeah, and just the logistical question was, in the plan, do we say that we're recommending that this group research those further? Because we've got
Yeah,
years
I
of this
know
group
it is
meeting.
under the,
So I mean, we could explicitly state that, I guess.
I don't know if I can point to this group, I have to say, you just state general issues. Someone else might do it, maybe this,
Maybe they do it. I guess the reason this is under legislation is because in order to have a solid waste disposal ban, it's gonna have to be legislative, but, that's why that's there. I would just say, as far as the recommendations of what makes sense for New Hampshire to do, should be something, I wouldn't put it on the legislature to do that, because as much as I love them, I think maybe we could do a better job.
So this is Lynn, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Thanks. So in Massachusetts, this is not a legislative decision. It's the agency's decision. And that's because Massachusetts has enabling legislation that authorizes their environmental agency to, after appropriate research, maybe with regulation and public comment, to adopt disposal bans. So there is a substantive research, in-depth research phase that happens, economic issues, the market issues that have been being addressed here, how to enforce it, all the panoply of things that people have been alluding to. But it's not legislative. I just don't think it's, going to your point about loving the legislature, this is really nuanced stuff.
It is.
And Lynn doesn't think the legislature can do this. But authorizing the agency, who is brilliant to do this through regulation, makes a lot of sense to me.
So we could say we could put something like that under regulatory too. I mean, I don't disagree with you, Lynn. In fact, it gets to a point I made earlier about what we could authorize the agency to do more. But even that, I think that part would take some legislation to authorize them to do more, but it also would take funding.
Absolutely. But I just feel that some of the conversation, well, not just about disposal bans today, but about many of these issues, as everybody knows, they're wildly complex. There's a lot of affected stakeholders, and it requires more information than we have at our fingertips. And trying to resolve it, trying to have this group come up with the definitive solutions, I think is probably beyond
too far.
Coming up with recommendations and goals and creating a legislative strategy to enable the department to pursue this in a more detailed, substantive way, and act. It just seems like a more substantively credible, with all due respect.
No, I don't disagree at all. So I'm gonna just look to the staff to try to interweave this a little bit. This isn't you tooting your own horn. This is us suggesting that you add, I think sometimes it's awkward for this agency to say that we want to do more, you know what I'm saying? I think that it's important that there be a partnership here with the agency in trying to push this forward. So however you want to finesse that in here. Lynn, thank you for saying that. It's a really important point. Okay.
We on page 9?
Yep.
Your insert up front and goal. There may be a goal of the plan. I don't think it should be in here relative to challenges of interstate commerce clause.
Which are you on?
Goal 4.
Goal 4. Your insert, first opening paragraph.
Goal should be to
Take
limit
it
and
out.
preserve.
All right. Anything else on page 9?
This goal actually calls out the alternatives. So our group has a few things that could fit several different places. I thought a great comment by one of our members that DES should take a real hard look at revamping their research and development permits if we really want to think about alternatives. Not that they're an obstacle, but they need to be rethought, I think. And I tied in, and I know we don't have this kind of resource, but when you look where advances came in wastewater and in Has Waste, it was programs like the EPA site program and the wastewater I&I program. The idea that somebody could try an alternative and the government to a degree backstops the liability and the risk, right? At least on the pilot. So in here, definitely the permits come in, pursuing some of the funding maybe to support some innovative alternative programs. We would want to see maybe some of that in here possibly in goal 4.
Anybody else on page 9? Page 10. My only question was in the in action 4, we use this MSW. This just gets into our definitional thing. That was the waste reduction subcommittee under the section, second action 4. So, just so we're clear on what that meant, if we're gonna use that. I was trying to decide whether on this next action 4 about the waste characterization study, were these two actions that your committee added, are they basically the same thing, or is that two different things?
So one is, we were just talking about this again today, so one is a waste characterization study, which was already included in the outline, which is what is the waste that is being disposed of?
What's in the waste?
In New Hampshire. And then the waste generation studies is to better understand what waste is being generated in New Hampshire. So
Okay.
they are different.
Okay, great. I thought this was interesting that the second largest in weight, trash being put in landfills is plastics, according to EPA's. So,
Our numbers, I think that's
Well,
higher.
that's a big caveat. They're not talking about soda bottles.
Sure.
They're talking about everything that's plastic. You know, car parts, computers, anything, chairs, furniture. That's
Gotcha.
plastic.
Probably here as well, but as you said, funding comes up lots of places, but again, since 4 calls out alternatives, we wanted there to be some thought about, with the new available funding, hopefully, and Reagan's email was much appreciated, additional funding for New Hampshire DES staff, so they can attend webinars, come up to speed on alternative technologies, be brought up to a level where they're a true partner, and that up till now they've been underfunded, understaffed, can't travel to meetings out of state, whatever it be. So we thought funding, somewhere in this document, the funding should call out for the staff at DES and other regulatory entities in the chain to get further education as well.
where are we? 11.
Before we go there, your 2 edits down the bottom. Your first one, I would just change that a little bit, language. Full limiting disposal in New Hampshire by out-of-state entities, I would insert if they do not comply with those states' own regulations prior to disposal.
Okay.
Just a text change.
Yeah.
They need to comply with what's required of them.
Does the staff have that?
Just a minor edit.
It just raises questions for me of legality, but yeah.
Well, I was gonna start there, but
I know. Actually, this came from a comment from somebody on the Waste Management Council, which is
Yeah.
why I put it in there.
and I will tell you, we don't ship material here that doesn't meet standards in like Massachusetts C and D, right? Doesn't go up here.
And then I'll just, on my last one there, review definitions for updating and clarification, e.g. recycling. I just think it's important. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff in our solid waste our solid waste legislation, our statutes that could take a second look, and I thought in particular the use of the term recycling was one.
So does that get to Duncan's point, should we do the glossary of terms?
I don't know if most solid waste plans do. I think we will have to. And as you guys are going through this, you can think about what makes the most sense to define. Okay, now on page 11.
Just to reiterate the points that were made earlier, this is some of the weakest language. I'll just collaborate, participate, develop. It's very weak language, and yet this is something that is so critical to making a waste reduction goal happen. Because if we don't, then we're relying on markets outside of our jurisdiction. We really need to beef this up, and I think we should revisit the reestablishment of the Recycling Market Development Coordinator position. That's a position, but that's a pretty low-cost option that was able to accomplish quite a bit.
Can we add that as an action item? What is that?
Recycling Market Development position. They worked closely with folks like Lynn Rubenstein and the NRA to develop markets.
In terms of the weak sauce language, I mean, I think that without infrastructure, there are not going to be markets, and without markets, there's not going to be infrastructure. So they're inextricably they belong together, and they need to be together, because otherwise they won't. Neither one of them will exist.
Maybe we could just put a sentence like that right up front. I mean, it's an important point, right? Like the second sentence under goal 5.
Right. I mean, to Duncan's point, if we create a market in New Hampshire for recycling styrofoam or marine plastic, those who are producing that waste need to have the mechanisms to create a market-ready product to deliver it to that market. So,
Now you mentioned marine plastics. I've been thinking about them a lot lately. It's everywhere. I mean, we haven't talked about boats. We haven't talked about cars. I mean, I don't quite know where you put huge items. I mean, do you get smashed up boats at the landfill? Where do boats go?
Not as many as you would think. Years ago, we got a lot of them. I don't know where they go. They just bring them out to Winnie and sink them or what?
I mean,
We just took one in yesterday at the transfer station.
But not as many as you would think, right, Duncan? I mean,
No. It's an
they
unusual
recycle
thing.
them. There was a bill somebody introduced that focused on boats. I forgot which way it went, but I'm just gonna, I had sent another comment to the staff. I said, where do boats, I mean, we need to talk about boats and cars and things
They end
like
up in the
that
back
in
40
here.
most of the time.
Huh?
They end up in the back 40 most of the time. If you
Yeah,
drive
it's
around
really
and really start
sad.
looking for boats, you'll see a lot of crappy boats, sitting in people's yards.
Right, whereas cars get recycled
Yeah.
by and large.
I was gonna say the Schnitzer Northeast type network, I imagine boats must get there to some degree.
Boats are
Cars
more
certainly
plastic.
get there.
Well, if we just make a note about, those are like huge bulky items with, I suppose airplanes falls in that too. But anyways, okay, so 11. I think the overarching comment is we need to beef up our infrastructure references. Okay, 12. And I already made the change, explore reliable ongoing funding sources.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very collaborative. Where's your, I mean,
Jim's got it in his
Okay.
computer now.
Yeah, and I'll pass it on to Mike and everyone. Yeah, so we were wrestling again, some of the things on our committee notes could be in goal 3, goal 4, goal 6. Since goal 6 calls out infrastructure, the development of infrastructure in this sense is developing a market, basically an advanced recycling campus, and other things. But we can put it here in 6, or the staff will decide where to put it. But yeah, we've got quite a few comments related to
there.
infrastructure, development
Energy.
of markets, this idea of a recycling campus, which internationally they do quite well. It becomes an industrial park, if you will, where you have recycling, advanced recycling, even maybe the new chemical recycling of plastics. And right there you also have the users of those recycled materials, so you wind up with these campuses. And that could be really attractive if it worked out. I'm picturing, from being where I'm from, picturing a P as being a municipal solid waste recycling campus, and again, maybe it's a dream, I don't know, but that could be here under infrastructure.
do you want to add anything?
I mean, I just think that, if the report's gonna mean anything, it has to have language that basically says there's gotta be something that facilitates this infrastructure. Something that, I mean, if what we're saying, this plan is saying we want to do this, well then how do we've gotta ask for what it is that we want. We want a 40% diversion, we have to have a mechanism to do that 40% diversion, and that's the infrastructure, and that's what, that's what I have sort of written up as draft language says. We ask for what we want and see what the private sector can deliver to us for, what price. And then people have a choice, they can choose to participate in such an infrastructure venture or not.
Okay, all right, so Jim, we talked a lot, so you'll just pass that on to the.
Yeah, I've got a big chunk of the notes, and I will,
Right.
and it's a quote from Duncan, he wrote it for us.
We even
so
talked
yeah.
about landfill mining.
Oh yeah, that's right, that's, could be here or could be elsewhere, at least an alternative to think about in very specific cases where it made sense. And, the benefit of recovering the land, or I think one of the examples in our group was recovering the view of
Mount Monadnock.
I mean, it won't make sense everywhere, but there are certain examples where it's been used a little bit in New Jersey to recover wetlands that were now the highest mountains in parts of the state, Most of the time it doesn't work financially. Yeah, that'll be in there.
Okay, all right, well, Eric used the term unlined dumplets.
Right, and every small town had one. Right.
Okay, all right, so 12, 13, I mean, this is the EJ stuff, and my comment was at the top of page 13. I want to make sure that it includes this concept of using rural areas, or helping, and you talked about this in the article where Brian Patno did about, helping rural areas get more access to infrastructure, and also realizing that many of them have traditionally been used for disposal. So, and I'm expecting the staff to hone in a little bit more on this goal. Okay. Anybody have anything else?
If I could just ask Mike, maybe the logistics, what's better for you as the staff? I've got 2 pages of stuff. I could drop it into this document if you want, or I can just send you the 2 pages.
Why don't you do the latter?
Just send you the 2 pages.
That way we can figure out.
Want to do whatever helps you the most. Okay, great.
Okay. I'm getting confused as to what I said in subcommittee and what I said here, but we got to have the biennial plan to refer to help us springboard some of these things, and we still, because it wasn't actually a subcommittee, there's still this vast area of landfill discussion in here, public benefit analysis. I mean, these are topics that are being discussed at the legislature, capacity issues, it's just not in here. So hopefully in the next round there'll be something about this, because we'll have the biennial report, we'll refer to what's coming from out of state, what isn't coming from out of state, that sort of thing. So, is there anything anybody else wants to say about this?
What's the schedule for?
Yes,
next
okay,
edits?
sorry, I'm sorry we're going, but we have so much work to do, and I'm sorry it's afternoon. We actually did a projected schedule, and a Paige could, and I'm gonna thank Reagan for helping us noodle through all of this. Paige is gonna put it up there. I don't know who can see that, but, I mean, the bottom line is, after the last meeting, we kind of worked backwards, and we're like, okay, if this plan is due on October 1st, we have to have it out in a decent period of time so there can be public comment. And as we were working backwards, it seemed as though we've got to get it out for public comment by the first week of August. So we have one more meeting, we've got it in July. I assume the staff will do its best to incorporate what we've done here to recirculate another draft for us to really bore in on. We're not going to break up into subcommittees again. We're just going to have another roundtable discussion. I thought we did really good work here. I'd like to propose propose that we move the July 22nd meeting to like the 25th or 26th. I want to move, okay, I'm going to just say I'm being really, I am not going to be here. I can't be here on the 22nd, and I just think for continuity's sake it would be helpful if I'm here. So, you guys don't care, then we can just leave it the 22nd, but I would really like to make it either the 25th or the 26th. I mean, I don't care, it could even be the 27th, but.
So do the 26th?
I'll take 26.
26?
Yep.
Tuesday the 26th.
Yeah.
I can't be here for that.
Oops. Yes?
Do the 25th.
Yes, yes. Huh?
I can do either day.
Yeah, either day's fine with me.
Sorry, Duncan.
But it would be the same time?
Yeah. I mean, are there people that can't be here the 25th? Yeah. So we'll make it the 26th. And then.
Also do a Survey Monkey. You could do a Survey
Oh
Monkey.
yeah, why don't we do that? Do you guys want,
What works
would
best?
you do the Survey Monkey?
Then people never respond.
And then people don't respond?
Let's be honest.
Then we'll do
I
it
mean,
Tuesday. Who can't, Duncan, you can't make it Tuesday?
I mean, what about the 27th?
That I can do. I can do it literally any other day other than the 26th.
The 27th, this room isn't available. So I was able to, like tentatively reserve it for the 25th and the 26th, but the 27th, it's not.
We meet in another room. We'll get to be a smaller group every time.
This is,
Way many people.
yeah, the big, and it has, streaming capability, so Lynn can join, and anybody else who can attend remotely, so this room's kind of the most ideal.
Yeah, I mean, and we really, we can't back it up much more than that because we gotta give the staff time to get things ready to put it out to public comment the next week.
You wanna do earlier in July?
yeah, should it be earlier? Cause that's not leaving much time at all to,
Just
for
leaves
the
them a
staff
couple
to
hours to
incorporate
fix it.
updates.
But they actually have a lot, okay.
We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. I don't know, I talked to the staff about this and they felt like if we did it the 26th, it would be
All right,
okay.
let's do that. Let's do, because there are people that are not here today that may show up.
Right.
I still think a Survey Monkey's good. I know people may not, but at least the folks that do respond, it'll.
I mean, why don't we give it a shot? What should our deadline be? If you do the Survey Monkey, so today's Friday, I mean, we probably can't get it out. Could we get it out this afternoon, or is that just?
Yeah, we could probably do Survey Monkey this afternoon and have folks respond by like Tuesday next week or something.
Sure.
Okay. And I'll tell you what, the people that don't respond, either I can call them and hound them into a response.
There you go.
But are we tentatively blocking the 26th?
Yeah, I think that's what we, based on just the, here, what people are saying.
So we're gonna start at 9 or?
Let's start at 9. I think we've got a lot to do. So when is the next meeting at this point? What do you have down there? It's sometime in August?
Let's see. August 26th, after July.
I mean, so you guys are keeping track of this, we have the responsibility as a group of filing an interim report, by November 30th. And I think maybe there'll just be a page or two there, but basically we're gonna be saying that we worked on the long-range solid waste plan, we got it out the door by October 1st, and we did our job. And then maybe we'll take a break, and we'll resume at some point in the beginning of the year and keep rolling along. So that's sort of.
Has this been sent around to the group or no?
No, because I wanted to talk to people about it first.
Should it go out, be sent around?
Yeah, as
at some
long
point?
as we'll tweak it a little bit more after we get our doodle poll in. I mean, the other problem with that is we had a specific date, I think, on there of when it was gonna go for public comment. We don't actually know a specific date, so, you know, I don't wanna put it in the public domain with a specific date if we're not sure what it is at this
So
point.
just put a draft across the front of this,
Yeah.
so people know that all these things need to happen in a short period of time.
Right, or we could just put the first week of August for going out to public comment, something like that. Just wanted to talk to you guys generally about it first. All right, anybody want to say anything else? Thank you to Reagan for sending us the legislative update list. You guys can look at what she sent in the link. The governor hasn't decided yet what he's doing with HB 1454, which is the bill that would change the water rules around landfill siting. So I know a lot of folks are interested in how that's going to come out. And I think that's about it. Anybody have any other thoughts? No? Well, this has been intense. I'm tired. I don't know about you guys, but I'm just going to say I think we did some really good work. I hope we're helpful to DES as they move ahead. We've got a lot of good discussion, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice work.